Welcome to the channel where courage, determination and success stories light the way to a better tomorrow. Today we dive into a thrilling journey of survival, hope and bravery in a world overrun by zombies. Imagine facing a relentless enemy every day, knowing one wrong move could be your last. Today you will witness a story of fearless humans who refuse to give up, who risk everything to break free from a crumbling world ruled by the undead. Get ready for a tale filled with suspense, daring escapes and heart-pounding moments that will keep you on the edge of your seat. If you are someone who loves powerful stories of courage and survival, this one is for you. If you enjoy stories that inspire and ignite the fighter within, then you are in the right place. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon so you never miss an epic journey with us. Your support means the world and keeps us bringing you more incredible stories. Now let's dive into the thrilling world of courageous humans. Plan a daring escape from the zombie crisis. The sun was just a faint glow behind a thick wall of smoke and dust as a group of survivors gathered inside the ruins of an abandoned supermarket. The world as they knew it had collapsed months ago, taken over by a relentless swarm of the infected. These zombies, once humans, had turned into creatures driven by an endless hunger for flesh. The streets were graveyards, the city's ghost towns, but hope was not entirely lost among the ruins. Small groups of humans had managed to survive, hiding, scavenging, and fighting back every single day. Among them was Ethan, a former firefighter known for his bravery under pressure, Maria, a resourceful nurse who had seen more death than life in recent months, and Jordan, a quick-witted mechanic whose inventions had saved the group more times than they could count. There were others too, all united by the sheer will to live and the dream of finding safety beyond the wastelands that had once been their home. The supermarket offered shelter for now with its sturdy walls and stockpiles of supplies, but everyone knew it would not last forever. The zombies were evolving, smarter, faster and more persistent. Each night they came closer and closer, probing for weaknesses, looking for a way in. The group had one chance, and it was a risky plan. They had heard rumors of a safe zone miles away beyond the city, a place untouched by the infection where humans were rebuilding society, but to reach it they would need to pass through zones crawling with the undead. Ethan spread out a map over a dusty counter, tracing a path with his finger. It was not a direct route, but it might help them avoid the larger hordes. Maria bit her lip, studying the map with him, worry etched into her face. If even one thing went wrong, if they made one sound or one wrong turn, it would be the end. Jordan, meanwhile, checked over the battered armored vehicle they had pieced together from abandoned cars. It was their only shot at punching through the city limits fast enough to escape. That night tension hung heavy in the air. The group went over the plan again and again, memorizing every detail, knowing there would be no time for mistakes once they started. Ethan stood up, addressing the group with quiet determination. We stick to the plan, no heroics, no wandering off. If we move fast and stay quiet, we can make it through. As the first light of dawn broke, the survivors loaded into the vehicle, every heart pounding, every nerve on edge. The city outside was eerily silent, but everyone knew the quiet would not last. Jordan gunned the engine and they roared out of the supermarket parking lot. The streets flashed by broken cars, twisted metal and the occasional figure shuffling in the distance. At first it seemed like their luck might hold. The zombies were sparse, distracted or dormant, but halfway to the city limits they hit a roadblock. A bus jackknifed it across the street, leaving no way through. Ethan cursed under his breath, checking the map for an alternate route, but they had little choice. They had to go around. As Jordan reversed the vehicle, a loud metallic screech echoed through the empty streets, a sound that traveled far too easily in the silent city. The zombies stirred their heads, snapping toward the sound, and in seconds the first few were moving, then dozens, then hundreds. The horde was waking up. Maria shouted to go. Ethan waved them forward and Jordan slammed the accelerator down, weaving through debris with desperate speed. Behind them the mass of zombies gave chase, snarling and howling, a nightmare wave of hunger and death. The survivors knew they were running out of time, out of road and possibly out of luck, but they clung to one another, to the sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could still make it out alive. The battered vehicle jolted and bounced over cracked pavement as Jordan pushed it to its limits. The roar of the engine mingled with the shrieks of the undead behind them. Every second counted, every block they cleared was another small victory, but the city was a maze of wreckage and danger, and the path ahead was far from clear. Ethan leaned out the window, scanning the side streets for an opening, while Maria clutched the makeshift radio, trying desperately to call out to any other survivors who might be listening. Static answered her every time Jordan yelled over the noise, a side street coming up tight, but it might get us around the bus. Ethan nodded sharply, trusting his friend with his life. The vehicle swerved hard, tires squealing as they darted into the narrow alleyway. The alley was cluttered with trash and the wrecks of smaller cars, but it was clear enough to pass for now. The walls loomed close on either side, graffiti covered and pockmarked by bullet holes. Shadows shifted in every doorway, every window, but the survivors kept their focus forward, no time to think about what might be lurking nearby. Suddenly a figure stumbled out from behind a dumpster, not a zombie, a man, dirty, bleeding, waving frantically for help. The group had seconds to decide. Ethan gritted his teeth. "We can't stop," Jordan shouted, but Ethan had already made his choice. He reached out, grabbing the man and hauling him into the back of the vehicle. As they sped past, the man gasped out a thank you before collapsing onto the floor unconscious. Maria immediately knelt beside him, checking his wounds. They burst out of the alley into a wider street, but their brief delay had cost them. The horde had split, some of them now cutting them off. Up ahead, Jordan swore loudly. There was no way through, not without fighting their way past. The vehicle screeched to a halt, the group piling out weapons ready, makeshift clubs, pipes, even a single battered pistol Ethan had found weeks ago. The first wave hit them fast and hard, snarling, clawing, snapping with teeth yellowed and broken. Ethan swung his pipe hard, sending one of the creatures sprawling. Maria stayed close, using a crowbar to keep the zombies at bay, while Jordan fought like a whirlwind, keeping the path to the vehicle clear. Blood and sweat blurred their vision, but they fought with everything they had. They could not afford to be bitten. Even a scratch could mean death, or worse, transformation into the very monsters they were fighting. The man they had rescued stirred, groaning and blinking in confusion. Ethan yelled at him to stay down, but instead the man struggled to his feet, grabbing a broken chair leg and swinging wildly to help the survivors. He was weak, injured, but desperate to live. Minute by minute they pushed forward, forcing their way through the thinning horde. The noise, the chaos, it drew even more zombies from nearby side streets. The survivors knew they could not hold out forever. Jordan shouted over the din, "We have to go now." Ethan nodded, grabbing Maria and dragging her back toward the vehicle, the stranger limping after them. They piled back inside, Jordan flooring the accelerator before the doors were even fully shut. The vehicle roared forward, ramming through the last few stragglers with bone-jarring force. The city outskirts were in sight now, a few more blocks and they might make it to open ground. But the city had one last surprise for them. A massive sinkhole had swallowed part of the road ahead, caused by a broken water main collapsing under the weight of time and neglect. The vehicle skidded to a stop inches from the crumbling edge. The survivors stared in horror at the chasm yawning before them. Ethan jumped out, surveying the sinkhole frantically. It was too wide to jump and too deep to climb down and back up again, not with zombies closing in from behind. They needed another way, and fast. Jordan spotted something, a narrow alley to the right leading around the sinkhole. It was risky, too narrow for the vehicle. They would have to go on foot. The group made their decision in an instant, grabbing what supplies they could and abandoning the vehicle. They sprinted for the alley, hearts pounding, feet slipping on broken asphalt behind them. The horde poured into the street, a tidal wave of death and despair. As they ran, Ethan looked back once and saw the zombies flood over the vehicle, tearing at it in a frenzy, their one safe space now lost to the madness. They pressed on through the alley, clambering over obstacles, squeezing through gaps, always moving, always running, because to stop even for a second meant death. At the end of the alley they found themselves in an industrial zone, warehouses and factories long abandoned and silent. The stranger staggered beside them, pale and sweating but still moving. Maria supported him, murmuring encouragement. Jordan pointed ahead, a railway line running out of the city and into the open countryside. It was their new goal. If they could reach the tracks, they might find a maintenance shed or a small train, something, anything to put distance between them and the city. But the zombies were relentless, smarter than before, adapting, learning. They were not far behind, and the survivors knew the hardest part of their journey was still to come. They were bruised, battered, exhausted, but alive, and for now that was enough. Hope flickered in their hearts, fragile but burning bright as they pushed onward into the unknown. The railway tracks stretched out ahead like a lifeline, their rusty metal glinting faintly in the dim light of the afternoon. It was their best chance for escape, but it was also a path filled with uncertainty. The survivors pushed forward, their legs aching, their breath ragged, and their nerves frayed by the constant threat of the undead closing in. The distant groans of the zombies grew louder with each step, their relentless pursuit as unyielding as ever. Ethan led the way, scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger, while Jordan kept an eye on the rear, making sure none of the infected snuck up on them. Maria kept the stranger close, her medical instincts kicking in as she noticed his worsening condition. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and his steps sluggish. He was clearly in no shape to keep running, but there was little choice. They had to make it to the tracks. It was their only chance. How much farther? Maria asked, her voice tight with anxiety as she glanced over at Ethan. Not far, Ethan replied, his voice steady, though the weight of the situation pressed heavily on his shoulders. Just keep moving. They reached the tracks in what felt like an eternity, their bodies protesting with every step. As they approached the first set of warehouses that lined the edge of the railway, they spotted a dilapidated maintenance shed nestled among the crumbling buildings. It wasn't much, but it might provide temporary shelter and protection. It was their best bet. Without wasting time, they made their way toward the shed, moving quickly but cautiously. Every creak of the floorboards beneath their feet, every gust of wind that rattled the old structures, set their nerves on edge. They couldn't afford to let their guard down, not now, not when they were so close to safety. The shed was unlocked, the door hanging loosely on its hinges. Inside, they found a few tools scattered across the floor and some old crates, but more importantly, it offered them a brief respite from the chaos outside. They quickly barricaded the door with whatever they could find: wooden planks, metal scraps, and old pipes. "We'll rest here for a bit," Ethan said, breathing heavily as he dropped a few crates in front of the door. "We need to regroup." Jordan nodded, though he was still on edge. He didn't trust the safety of the shed, not with the horde closing in on them, not with the constant sense of danger that seemed to follow them wherever they went. Maria knelt next to the stranger, checking his pulse and temperature. He was feverish, and his wounds hadn't healed properly. She frowned, realizing they might have to make another tough decision soon. If he didn't get proper medical attention, his chances of survival were slim. "We can't stay here too long," Maria said, her voice low and urgent. "We need to get him proper help before it's too late." Ethan met her gaze, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We'll keep moving once he's stable. But we can't risk getting caught out there again." They huddled together in the dim light of the shed, the sound of the horde outside growing louder with each passing minute. It felt like an eternity before the stranger stirred, groaning softly as he opened his eyes. Where am I?" he asked, his voice weak and disoriented. "You're safe for now," Maria replied, trying to reassure him. "We've got to keep moving, but we'll help you as best we can." He nodded, though his eyes were filled with fear. I'm not going to make it, am I?" Ethan shook his head, his face grim. "We'll do everything we can to get you to safety. Just hang on." Outside, the horde continued to press in, the groans and growls of the undead becoming more pronounced. They were getting closer. The survivors knew their time was running out, and the clock was ticking faster than they'd like. Ethan stood up, moving to the cracked window to peer out at the street. The zombies were slowly but surely closing in, their shambling gait unmistakable. But there was something else, a movement in the distance. A shadow darting between the buildings, fast and deliberate. "Something's out there," Ethan muttered, his hand instinctively reaching for the worn-out pistol in his holster. "Is it zombies?" Jordan asked, his voice tense as he prepared his makeshift weapon. Ethan narrowed his eyes, trying to make out the figure. It was too fast to be one of the undead. It was human. "Could be another survivor," Ethan said, turning back to the group. "We need to be careful. We don't know if they're friend or foe." They all gathered near the window, peering out cautiously. The figure moved again, darting into an alleyway. Ethan motioned for them to stay quiet, then slowly opened the door of the shed just enough to slip outside. They moved quickly and silently, taking cover behind the shed as they crept toward the alley. As they approached, they heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, human footsteps, not the dragging shuffle of the undead. Ethan raised a hand, signaling the others to stop. He peered around the corner of the building, his heart racing. There, standing in the shadows, was a woman, her clothes torn and covered in dirt. She looked as though she had been through hell, her face was bruised, her body marked by the struggles of survival. "Hey!" Ethan called out, stepping into view, his voice cautious but firm. "We're not here to hurt you." The woman froze, her eyes wide with suspicion. For a moment, neither side moved. Then she spoke, her voice hoarse from dehydration and fear. "You're not with them?" she asked, her tone wary. "No," Ethan replied. "We're just trying to survive like you." The woman's gaze flickered over the group, assessing them before she slowly nodded. "I've seen the horde out there. It's only a matter of time before they find us." "We're heading for the tracks," Ethan said. "You can come with us, if you want." She hesitated for a moment, then made a decision. "I'm coming with you. If there's a chance of escape, I'm taking it." The group exchanged glances, silently agreeing that they could use all the help they could get. With the woman now in tow, they turned back toward the shed, ready to continue their fight for survival. With the woman joining them, the group now had a renewed sense of purpose. They couldn't afford to waste time, but the addition of another survivor gave them hope. Maybe they weren't alone in this nightmare, and maybe, just maybe, they could make it out of the city alive. The horde was still close behind them, and the shrieks of the undead filled the air, echoing down the narrow streets as the group sprinted toward the railway tracks. The woman, whose name turned out to be Sarah, was holding up better than they had expected, though her face still betrayed the fear and exhaustion of someone who had been running for too long. But she was resourceful, offering tips on avoiding larger groups of zombies and pointing out hidden paths that Ethan and Jordan hadn't noticed before. "We need to get to the tracks before nightfall," Ethan said, his voice low and determined as they moved. "Once we're out of the city, we can think about the next step." Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the area. "I've heard rumors of a train station out past the city limits," she said. "If we can get there, we might find a train or something to take us farther." "Let's hope we're not too late," Maria replied, keeping a hand on the stranger, who was still struggling to stay on his feet. They reached the edge of the industrial zone, and up ahead, they could see the railway tracks cutting through the horizon. The tall grass swayed in the breeze, and the distant rumble of a passing train was faint but reassuring. They were close, so close. But as they approached, the ground beneath them began to shake, sending vibrations through their feet. The unmistakable sound of distant growls reached their ears, and the survivors froze in their tracks. The horde had found them again. They had been running out of time all along, but now the reality hit hard, they had no more chances to run. Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't afford to fight, not with their backs against the tracks, not with the stranger barely able to stand, and not with zombies closing in on every side. Their best shot was the train station, but it was a gamble. If they didn't get there fast enough, they'd be surrounded. "We need to move, now," Ethan shouted, taking the lead again. "Stay together, keep moving forward." The group took off at a sprint, pushing their bodies to the limit, but the horde was closing in faster than they could run. Every breath was ragged, every step a struggle, as they reached the edge of the tracks. They spotted the train station in the distance, its outline barely visible against the setting sun. But between them and safety stood a thick line of zombies. They had nowhere to go but forward, and there was no time to find another path. "We have to get through them," Jordan said, his voice grim but steady. He had already begun scanning the surroundings, looking for anything that could help. He spotted a nearby stack of old wooden crates and started pulling them apart to create a makeshift barrier. "Keep them distracted," Ethan said. "We'll cover you." Jordan's quick thinking had given them a few moments of breathing room. The group moved quickly, setting up a weak barrier to slow down the zombies, but it wouldn't hold long. The undead were too numerous, too relentless. The sounds of shrieking zombies grew louder. They were almost on them. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he glanced back to check the group. Maria was helping the stranger, pushing him toward the station, while Sarah stayed close to Ethan, her eyes scanning the horde for any weak points. "Let's go," Ethan barked, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her along. "We need to make it to the station now." They pushed through the barrier, weapons raised, moving fast but carefully as the zombies closed in on their position. The first line of zombies slammed into the wooden crates, shoving them aside with bone-crushing force. They were almost there. The train station was now in sight, and with each step, the weight of their journey seemed lighter, despite the ever-growing danger. Then, as if on cue, a train horn blasted from the station, loud, urgent, and close. A train, long and heavy, was approaching. A lifeline. "It's a train!" Jordan yelled, his voice full of disbelief and relief. "We're getting out of here." The group surged forward, their sprint turning into a full-out dash as the train, a rusty but functional model, thundered toward them. The zombies were still coming, but the survivors were just a few steps away from the safety of the train. They reached the platform, their hearts racing, lungs burning. Jordan and Ethan reached the door first, pulling it open just as the first few zombies reached them. With a final burst of energy, they all climbed onto the train, scrambling over the metal steps into the safety of the car. But as they climbed aboard, the zombies reached the platform, clawing at the sides of the train, reaching for the survivors with gnarled fingers. For a moment, it seemed like they might still lose everything. But the train was moving, its engine roaring to life, slowly pulling away from the station. The horde could not keep up. They were left behind, their growls fading into the distance. Inside the train car, the survivors collapsed, exhausted, on the floor. The adrenaline that had carried them to safety now left them feeling drained, empty. But they were alive. They had made it. Ethan looked around at his group. They were battered, bruised, and broken, but they had survived. And in a world like this, survival was a victory in itself. "We did it," Maria said softly, her voice shaking. Ethan nodded, but there was no triumph in his expression. There was only the long road ahead. The world had changed, and so had they. But they were still here. They were still alive. And for now, that was enough. The journey to safety wasn't over, but as the train sped toward the unknown, the survivors could only hope that whatever lay ahead would be better than what they had left behind.